Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I'm doing a podcast today, my apologies, on feedback versus bullying. I have done a podcast, if you check and see, on sincere advice and adviceaholics. This is more because some people lack critical thinking skills and they assume that they're giving you like honest feedback, or they're giving you, if you will, like they're giving you advice, and they're not aware, or others, the people that they groom around them, are not aware that they're actually engaged in bullying. Now, instead of dragging these ideas from my own mind and trying to like make someone a target and look at how they act and think and speak, and then try to like create a list of all their actions and all the ways they think, and then say this is bullying and this is feedback, that's kind of like biased. It also shows a level of dishonesty, that you're not really aimed to get at the truth. And it shows that you're really trying to distort and misrepresent somebody out of ill will, malice, spitefulness, or hatred. So what I am going to do instead, just to be fair to this program or this podcast, is I'm going to give you some information from the Harvard Business Review on how to give feedback, or mistakes in giving feedback, and hopefully those mistakes will help you to understand. Sometimes we learn from the mistakes of others. It can help you to understand how to give feedback. And then I'm also going to review an article which actually talks about bullying. So I'm not actually reading or making things up and just on the fly. Somebody got on my nerves, so now I'm taking whatever they said and how they acted and how they said it and how they responded and saying, okay, this person is the profile of a bully. Rather, I'm reading from an article. It talks about how bullying works, projection, and scapegoating, and I'll review that so that the person can say, I am just looking at a set of rules and principles about giving feedback using the Harvard Business Review. And this, again, Political Insights article, which I've shared more than once, which talks about how bullying, their traits and tactics designed to damage other people, how that works. So you can look at those identifications, if you will, or these profiles, and you can decide if you or someone that you is talking to you or you're talking to them is giving you feedback, or is engaged in bullying or grooming you to aid them and enable you to become a bully. So from the Harvard Business Review, it says feedback number 1. Just drinking my coffee here, so excuse me. It says the feedback judges individuals. That's the mistake number 1. Not the actions. Putting feedback in judgmental terms puts people on the defensive. And you've sent the message that you know what is right or wrong. So you're playing judge here. There's nothing wrong if you're a judge. In this case, came before you and you're supposed to judge, but you're playing judge without right. And you're offering feedback, but not on the action, like I saw you do this, I heard you say this, but you're really judging the individual as a person, instead of judging the actions of that person. Mistake number 2, the feedback is vague, and this is a major problem. People seem to think that if they give vague feedback that you're both on the same page. and you're like, I'm not on the same page with you. Your feedback is so vague that one doesn't know what your feedback is about. It's conjecture because it's not complete. It's not specific. It's not clear. It's not direct. So putting feedback, so stay clear from cliches and catchphrases. And a lot of times people use that as a way like to avoid being direct. And they think they're being direct by using, catchphrases. If you want to really encourage someone to repeat productive behavior, you have to let them know what they did so that they can keep doing it. Number 3, the feedback speaks for others. Stick with the information that you know. Dragging a third party's name into the mix only confuses the recipient, who then wonders why others are talking about them behind their back. So when you say things like Khalid, then it signals to the person that there's gossiping going on, there's backbiting going on, and there's slandering going on, because why are you dragging third parties, and why aren't those third parties talking to the person directly? So again, the feedback speaks for others. You mentioned that person's name, or that person's name, or subtly this person's name, or this person's name. Stick with the information that you know. Don't go around the bush dragging in third parties into something that doesn't concern you. If that third party wants to address it, they should demand that be addressed, but that should be addressed in a manner that is for them. That has to be a process. An example of that would be, I know somebody who was using another person to kind of speak to you. So she's constantly like having somebody attack you on their platform. But then when you would ask her, are you behind this? She'd say no. And the person would attack, and then she'd say no. And the third person would attack, and she'd say it's not her, that she doesn't know what's going on. But they're mentioning like actions or like misunderstandings that relate to you and that third party. So finally, one time she explodes, and then she starts making all these wild accusations. Well, then you went into your record and you brought to light to her that all these accusations can easily be proven to be wrong, although the burden of proof is the one who's making the accusation, not on the accused. But still, you went and showed her that I was not even in town for those 2 months, not that date you gave me, but the 2 months of that interval of time frame which you gave. So can you withdraw your accusations? And she didn't want to withdraw the accusations. And you said, well, can you come here before someone you trust so that we could resolve this dispute? And you bring your evidence and I bring mine. And she didn't want to do that. But she continually was speaking through other individuals. So again, the feedback speaks for others. So you'll see people who made themselves the mouthpiece for a third party without even verifying if what they are repeating is actually factual. The other thing is, feedback is sandwiched between two positive messages. So I'll say what a wonderful person Fedwa is, blah, blah, blah. Another positive thing, and right there I sandwich in, between the lines, some information that I want to push towards you in a way. Well, you're supposed to be giving feedback. There's a time to give positive information. There's a time to give feedback. The person is not stupid. They can read between the lines. You want to say something, then just be direct. You can, in a civil way, say, I saw, I heard, I feel, I was hurt, but you have to speak for yourself. Don't speak for a third party. Now, if you want to be a supporter for a third party, you can say, I'd like to talk with you on behalf of this third party who's afraid to talk with you. Or you could bring someone along, like Moses brought Harun, his brother Aaron, if you will, to speak to the Pharaoh. If somebody is so fearful or you're so afraid of somebody, you can bring someone as a support. So you can be there to support this person and say, I am there to support you while you're speaking and asking for your rights. We get to mistake number 5. The feedback is exaggerated with generalities. Avoid those little words, always and never. It puts people on the defensive because there's usually that one time. Mistake number 6. The feedback psychoanalyzes others, the motives behind their behavior. They could hear you when you're silent. Your heart is broken, and your heart is not broken. And they psychoanalyze you. It could be a divorce, resentment over a person's advancement, burnout, whatever you think you know about someone's intents and motives is probably dead wrong. So unless the person spoke with their own words and said, this is what I'm feeling, you have no right to psychoanalyze and tell the world how they are feeling. You can tell us how you feel. You can ask them if they would like to share with you how they feel. But when you psychoanalyze another's motives and intents and speak for their feelings and their hidden thoughts and their what goes through their heart, that's not feedback. Mistake number 7. Feedback goes on too long. Know when to stop. Now, I shared this article on July 2nd, 2015, but I've also shared it many other times before that time regarding an issue that I was facing. And we're now in January 23rd, 2022. And we're still in that same loop of meddling and interfering and meddling and interfering. And it's been possibly close to 10 years at times because it seems like you cannot let things end. You can't come forth directly and before a third party, withdraw your accusations, admit to the abuse that you engaged in, and at the same time, you can't let go. Number 8, the feedback implies an implied threat. Telling someone their job is in jeopardy doesn't reinforce good behavior or illustrate bad behavior. It only creates animosity. So, acting in ways that tries to control others, manipulate others, and instead of addressing again the action, you're using fear and emotional blackmail as a way to get the person to be so in submission to you. Number 9, the feedback uses inappropriate humor. Like you'll show a picture of a man and a woman in Mecca and you express love and you're supposed to be joking and all your jokes seem to be hurtful. They can be perceived as slanderous. And so you also might use sarcasm as a substitute for feedback. Like you'll mock people who went to therapy, even though you're promoting yourself as somebody who wants to help people who go to therapy. It doesn't sort of reconcile with itself. So keep snide comments to yourself. Keep slanderous images and comments to yourself. If it doesn't concern you, don't worry about it. Focus on your own backyard and your own life. Somebody came to you and they felt they were oppressed. You can openly support them and say, I am supporting XYZ, and come to the appropriate channels through the courts or through the mediator, which was open to that third party, and they refused to come. Mistake number 10, the feedback is a question. It's not a statement. Your phrasing feedback as a question is too indirect to be effective. And it may even be interpreted as sarcastic. So sometimes people will give that advice and they're really asking a question, but what they're really doing is they're trying to be sarcastic with their question, and you can kind of see through that. So you're not giving advice. This is not how advice is given. So by learning from these mistakes, we can learn what not to do. If your intention and you're genuine that you really want to give advice, at least you know from this Harvard Business Review article what not to do. So look at Harvard Business Review and look at feedback and 10 mistakes of what not to do, and you should find the article online, and then you can go ahead and see, do I do that? Take that as, again, I didn't write this article, I didn't contribute to this article, I was not in any way involved, so I'm just using it because I don't want it to come out as I saw somebody, I monitored their actions, how they think, how they sleep, how they talk, how they walk, and then I came and I used them as an example of a profile of somebody who's bad, and then start to say, don't be like that. Nope, I'm going through and I'm looking for business profiles and I'm looking business articles, and they're telling us how to give feedback. And I could, of course, given it from an Islamic perspective, but I'm trying to be general because some of the individuals that also need to understand this are non-Muslims. So let me now go and discuss something that I've also shared more than once, because again, people lack critical thinking skills, so they assume that they're giving advice or they're calling you to the right way, from an Islamic perspective, but they're really engaging in bullying. A target's awareness of projection can help them translate whatever they are being accused of into an awareness of the bully's own misdemeanors. The bully may be identified by the fact that they're the ones criticizing and attempting to discredit the target, rather than there being any evidence of the converse. So vilifying the target is most frequently used as a gaslighting tactic in bullying. It's a powerful means of putting the victim on the defensive while simultaneously masking the aggressive intent of the manipulator. The bully then falsely accuses the victim of being an abuser. In response, when the victim stands up for or defends themselves or their position. No one's behavior is perfect, so we're not asking here for perfection. And many balanced, well-intentioned people will at times unjustifiably or advertently upset others. We're not speaking about the usual here and there tit for tat. When this is drawn to their attention, they're usually horrified. This is a person who's made a mistake, but they didn't intend to hurt you. You say, when you said this, you hurt my feelings. And it's really based on evidence that they did say this. There's no denial that they said it, and they didn't understand how they were being perceived. They didn't understand how it made you feel. And so when they realized that by them saying these things, it's not called triggers, it's called being sensitive, that you're actually come across as aiding abuse, mental, emotional, social abuse against them. They become horrified and they remove themselves. Serial bullies, on the other hand, do not want to know what the negative effects of their behavior. Denial, retaliation, feigning victimhood are some of the ways bullies express their antipathy for anyone who is able to describe their behavior, see through their mask of normality, or help others to do the same. Here are some recognizable. I have something in my throat. Let me just take a. Here are some recognizable bullying traits and tactics designed to damage, isolate, discredit, and eliminate the target. Bullies are adept at exploiting the trusts and needs of individuals, organizations, and groups for personal gain. They react to criticism with denial, retaliation, and feigned victimhood. The bully grooms bystanders, so they're very good at grooming, by the way, and the target to believe that the target deserves the treatment they're receiving and attempts to limit contact between others and their target. Often the bully will use communications that exclude the target so there is no opportunity for them to defend themselves and present their truth. Repeat this one again. Often the bully, remember I talked about feedback with using dragging in third party. Often the bully will use communications that exclude the target. So this person's addressing you and they're throwing in a third party, but you're excluded from that conversation. You don't know what's happening. You just know that there's been gossiping going on. There's been communication going on about you, but you're never given the opportunity to know the full story so that you can weigh in and defend yourself and present your truth. They just start, pretending they're giving advice, while speaking to each other behind your back, and then coming to a decision without any opportunity for you to know what they said, what evidence was discussed, who are the witnesses, none of that. You're just constantly being bullied. It's not feedback or advice, it's bullying. The bystanders see only the Dr. Jekyll side of the bully, but only the target sees the Mr. Mrs. Hyde side. Again, Dr. Jekyll is sweet, manipulative, and charming. Mr. and Miss Hyde is evil. This is the real person. And it's all an act. Bullies exert power and control by a combination of selectively withholding information. Again, you never get the full side of the story. If you reach out and say, "What is your story?" they never tell you the story. You're just left wondering what the story is. You know that there's a story, but nobody will tell you the story. So they selectively withhold information, spread lies and disinformation. Again, I didn't write this. I'm just getting it from an article about how bullying works, projection, and scapegoating. So again, I talked about feedback, where you're speaking for a third party and the person realizes, why are you talking behind my back with this third party? Why doesn't this third party come and talk to me? Or why don't they stand up and speak for themselves? Why don't you join hands together like Moses and Harun and if you're afraid, and come and speak together? But make it transparent that you too are supporting each other. But what comes out is withholding information, spreading lies, and disinformation. Therefore, everyone has a distorted picture of only what the bully wants them to see. The target finds that in any response, because they don't know, again, what the full story is behind their back, that is, being marinated, everything they say and do is twisted, distorted, and misrepresented. Bullies are adept at manipulating people's perceptions with intent to engender a negative view of the target in the minds of others. This is achieved through undermining, discrediting, including the creation of doubts and suspicions and the sharing of lies. So they talk behind your back, and what is taking place is a selective withholding of information. Like the target is never allowed to defend themselves, so they cannot share information that says, well, this person's a liar and here's why. And so this lying campaign becomes marinated, and so what you see is that the creation of doubts, suspicions, and sharing of lies. Bullies use other people. This is why I said the third party. Bullies always use other people to further the aim of discrediting their target, creating a false impression of consensus. So they could never face, let's just say, the Pharaoh alone. They could never stand up and give you an example in current day, like Ahad Tamimi. Courageous, right? Stood up, she slapped the Israeli soldier. She could face her abuser. They can never face that person face to face. If you're making claims behind someone's back that they're an abuser, but yet you're running around creating this false consensus and you're never able to face to face address the person, then what you're really trying to do is you're trying to use the crowd as a way to bring the individual into a position of submission to your will, to your desire, and to your needs. So bullies poison the atmosphere and actively poison people's minds against the target. When the bully is this, when you found out about the bully, then they start to act like a victim and turn the focus on themselves, as using examples of trying to make the person feel guilty, feel sorry for the bully. Some of the things that they will say is like, let's just focus on the future, make a fresh start, forgive and forgive, you gotta move on, and so on. Well, you're welcome to move on. No one is holding you back. But if the person felt that to move on, they need to create a no contact rule between you and them, then you need to respect that. And while you're moving on and going on in your future. But they can't respect that. So they're not really moving on, and they're not going into the future after they convinced everybody in the world that you're the bully and you're the abuser. They still want to maintain contact with you. And this is the really aggravating part. The oppressed always don't want to have contact with those who've oppressed them. So you can always tell if somebody is genuinely oppressed by the fact that they're telling two stories. One story is that they are oppressed. Another story is they want to maintain contact with the person that they accused of oppressing them. Whereas a person who's genuinely oppressed, he's not really interested if you believe their story of being oppressed or not. He's just obsessed with one thing, he or she. Don't contact them anymore. They don't care who believes them. They don't care if you go forward, backward, love yourself, hate yourself. They just care about one thing. Don't contact them anymore. They want to end the abuse. And so the oppressor, it's like, Pharaoh, he wanted to oppress the Israelites while he's sitting here arguing for his security. At the same time, he didn't want to let them go. When they ran, when Moses took them and ran, he ran after them. And you could always tell that that spirit of oppression is like that. You're running around withholding information about all the vile things you did and abused that person. Then you're running around and spreading lies, spreading misinformation, and discrediting the person and yet wanting the person that you've harmed mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically to maintain contact with you. That, in a nutshell, is how a bully works. They don't want to end contact. They don't want to create boundaries. They want to harm you, and they want you to be submissive to their needs. We talked about the poisoning the atmosphere. There's also the bystanders. These are the individuals who often feel cognitive dissonance and usually minimize their discomfort by reasoning to avoid any responsibility. It usually goes this way because they themselves don't want to become targets. And so the way the bully attacks the target scares bystanders from taking a stand. And you see that, for example, in current day terms, when the people go after, takes anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is real. But they take anti-Semitism and they go after every Palestinian activist who's defending their rights. And the way they do it is in such a way that they destroy their future, they destroy their lives. So what happens to the bystanders? They don't want to be at the receiving end. They don't know the difference between anti-Semitism and political activism that's fighting for the end of oppression of Palestinians. They can't tell the difference. Just like I said, some people can't tell the difference between giving advice and bullying. So they become like these bystanders who are afraid, if you will, of standing up. So they go along, with the bully because they're afraid of being the target. The bully encourages and manipulates as many bystanders as possible to lie, act dishonorably, dishonestly, withhold information, spread lies and misinformation, and the bully manipulates bystanders to punish the target for alleged infractions, so the bystanders also become instruments of harassment. And so I talked about it in one of my blogs about the hooligans or the hyenas. So although they're claiming to the whole world that you're being oppressed, and yet they're running around behind your back, talking to you through third parties, while protecting themselves and pretending that they're not doing so. And they're spying on you, and they're eavesdropping on you, and they're running around to these parties who are speaking for them. They're spreading lies, and they're also spreading misinformation as a way to attack you. And it's all done, again, behind the target's back. The target never gets the opportunity to come and say, give me the full story. And if they address the issue openly and directly, no one gives them the full story. Some people gain gratification. This gets into the joy and pleasure and happiness. You'll see them laughing. You'll see them expressing happiness and joy. And so they like the idea that they can target you, and they think it's funny. Like I said, they'll mock the fact that someone goes to therapy. They'll think it's funny. And so they love the idea they have this perverse feeling of satisfaction. They love themselves so much, you could say, that they get this perverse feeling of hurting people. You'll find joy. They'll mock. They'll laugh. That's another sign of a bully. They don't feel disturbed inside. They feel happy. Some observers regard behavioral responses that are reasonable and civilized as a sign of weakness rather than maturity. Many seem to lack critical thinking skills and analytical abilities, so cannot see through the facade of the bully's mask of deceit, even when it's obvious sometimes. there's very often an element of not wanting to see too. Sometimes these individuals might be figures, like public figures that many hold in respect, and you're afraid, and everyone goes through that. Like you don't, like if some individuals, you did not experience their evil, you were not on the receiving end, you would not believe if someone came and told you this person would do something like this. And so sometimes we have to experience these, if you'll be on the receiving end of these false accusations and smear campaigns and misinformation, because it helps to build in us critical thinking skills and analytical abilities to help us understand the difference between feedback and bullying, or mistakes in feedback even, and bullying. So other people fear becoming targets. They go along, like I said, to get along. So here we have conformity. Bullies are extremely vindictive people and will do everything in their power to damage and destroy anyone who can see through their mask of deceit. So they'll put on, this facade of they love the right way, and they love and they know how to love, and they're very good. In rare cases, you may receive information from a bystander who wants to help, but is afraid to do so publicly for fear of retribution and fear of becoming the next target. Apathy and indifference to the distress of others are widespread. The bully relies on this. So, to end, this is a quote by Tim Field, again, 1999. Bullying is a compulsive need to displace aggression and is achieved by the expression of inadequacy, by projection of that inadequacy onto others through control and subjugation. Again, they want you to be submissive to their needs. At one point, they're like, you're the abuser, but then when you go away, when you practice no contact to test them, they're running after you. It's like, you just said I'm an abuser. Why are you trying to make me contact you? You should be running away like Moses ran away from Pharaoh. So their story just does not reconcile. What they really want is for you to be subjugated, to be submissive to their needs. So bullying is sustained by abdication of responsibility. That is through denial, counter-accusation, pretense of victimhood, and perpetuated by a climate of fear, ignorance, indifference, silence, denial, disbelief, deception, evasion of accountability. They will never ever face you with their witnesses, with any facts, before an independent third party and tell their story. And so this is some of the ways that bullying works. And there are, of course, laws about bullying and cyberbullying. But it helps us to reflect on that empathetic people are natural targets for sociopaths. And it teaches us that if you're somebody who has a sensitivity, and you tend to have compassion for others, you are going to be a target for bullies, because bullies don't like you. So beware of individuals spreading rumors about others behind their back. Psychopaths are cowards, know that they are telling lies, enjoy hurting others, there's a pleasure in it, and they're very afraid of being found out who they really are. Thus, everything takes place. This is the important part here to differentiate between advice and bullying. Everything takes place with bullying. Everything takes place behind the target's back. It's in the shadows. All attempts to bring it out of the shadows, bring it into the light, are removed. Everything takes place behind the target's back. So to remember, the bully is telling everyone about him or herself, because of the fact that they're always in the shadows. They're always behind the target's back, and the target is saying, come forth in the light, and they keep speaking in the shadows, know that the bully is telling everyone about him or herself, thoughts and actions, and say they could hear you when they're silent. They're really projecting their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own actions, what he, she has done, is doing, or is about to do. So I just want you to reflect on that. Again, it's about how bullying works, projection and scapegoating. So look at that, those two ideas, those two thought processes, and recognize that a bully is just a convincing liar. They make up anything to fit their needs at that moment. And because they're a convincing liar, they will have many hooligans that will support their lies and stand by them, but they will do so. This is how you can tell that they're a bully, behind the target's back. I mean, and you could see that even in current day terms, like Palestinians are, 6 human rights organizations were accused of terrorism. How did these accusations come out? It's behind the target's back, in the shadows. They're not allowed to see the evidence. They're not allowed to respond to the accusations or the evidence or the witnesses. Everything is done again, while the target is excluded from the conversation. So I hope this was beneficial, and I hope I will, on the podcast, add articles, links to the articles of both, and I hope you will find them beneficial. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah wa barakatuh.